by two marauders, Nikto.
You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive.
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and I'm joined, as always, by the incredible podcasting man, Julian Darris. Julian, how are you doing? You okay?
I'm doing okay. I have thoughts.
You have thoughts about this?
We're doing
this film?
Yeah, The Incredible Shrinking Man, 1957. How are you doing, Scott?
I'm good. Yeah, I've got some thoughts on this one. This is another linked with Jack Arnold, director of The Creature on the Black Lagoon, who sort of did last episode. And another connection really is this is obviously based on a Richard Matherson novella, much like I Am Legend. The different versions of that. So really tying a lot here though. But in this one, after Scott Carey begins to shrink because of an exposure to a combination of radiation and insecticide, medical science is powerless to help him. Starring Grant Williams as Scott Carey, Randy Stewart as Louise Carey, and Paul Logan as brother Charlie Carey. They're kind of like the main ones to sort of note. And we'll get into some of those as well. But what are your initial thoughts then on 1957's The Incredible Shrinking Man?
It's kind of campy. It's kind of, a silly movie at some point. But I have to say the more I've sat with it, the more impressed I am with it. It really is just based on a very simple premise, which admittedly doesn't make a lot of sense. But, it makes as much sense as mutants or anything else, right? A multiverse or anything else, right? It's just an inciting incident, and the rest is just kind of implications of that, and it goes to a really weird sort of cynical kind of place. Which is kind of amazing.
We'll get to the end. I mean, the last moments of this film are kind of trippy and weird, but I've not read the book. I think I should really. I feel like I want to now. It gets kind of the tone gets kind of dark, but kind of weirdly trippy and stuff at the end. But yeah, generally it starts with Scott Carey and his wife Louise on a boat, enjoying a vacation, and there's banter and there's kind of jokes between them. It's all very sort of civilized, and then a cloud of sorts, a fog of sorts, is drifting across the ocean. You're not entirely sure where they are in relation to land, like how far out they are. And he gets covered in glitter and whatever this cloud is, and apparently just being inside the boat protects his wife.
It's not really clear. Yeah, he went to a rave, and for all you kids, this is what happens if you go to those raves and take weird drugs. You never know what they're going to do to you. You might just shrink. Yeah.
And then I like the fact that this is based on, they tried to give it something. Two things I do appreciate: that the science, although the science is daft and ridiculous, it's not just a one-off event. It is this is a completely unusual event because you had this radioactive cloud that are just floating around the ocean, but then you also got covered in an insecticide which has reacted with the chemical compound of the radiation. So at least they're going oh no, this is a completely unique event that we cannot sort of have fathomed. The other thing I like is this isn't a mad scientist having done it to himself.
Mm-hmm.
Which I do think sort of is better than we've had things before. And I don't think I think Matheson's always about sort of the regular guy getting pulled into these crazy situations. This isn't sort of like The Fly or one of those sort of things where it's a mad scientist sort of experimenting on himself, which I appreciate.
Yeah, it's pure accident, and I think that the pesticide thing is a little silly. I mean, later on they'll have a partial cure at least, and I think how did you know this? It does seem as if the cloud was radioactive, but the pesticide being a second factor helps explain why Louise wasn't affected for me. She was inside, but also hadn't been exposed to the pesticide. It looks in the beginning shots like it's sort of like, is it a cloud left over from an atomic explosion of some sort? It's not really said where this comes from. But the bottom line is we're entering the atomic age and shit's going to get strange. We're going to get funky up in this place.
I think that's I do like this atomic fear films that are sort of like, we're all going to either be shrunk or grown or mutated or, that's what.
Well, it's like Fantastic Four with the space age, right? Like, shit's going to happen to us when we start going in space. Just wait. Nuclear explosions are going to make weird shit happen. It's going to unleash those mutant genes.
Yeah. Well, I like the fact that even in films like The Fantastic Voyage, anything sort of like it's a nuclear powered thing, and you're like, oh, okay, that answers that. Thank you for clearing that up. But reasoning aside for why this happens, the other thing I do like about this film, and it kind of becomes a problem as it goes on because it's inconsistent, but is the fact that this takes time. This isn't like an instant of like waking up the next morning and he's sort of like half an inch high or whatever. Like, this takes time. Like, it's noticeable in those things where it's happened and then all of a sudden, like, his shirt doesn't fit quite right, and then he's sort of like, his wife just kisses him straight on and he's like, you used to have to go up on tiptoes to kiss me. I used to be 6'1", now I'm 5'11", and I've lost 10 pounds. And like, it's kind of, it's a creeping thing again. I mean, this feels very Twilight Zone. And we've done so much of that Serling era as Twilight Zone. I'm watching this and thinking like, oh, I can imagine like Rod Serling watching this and being like, this is right up my alley, kind of, especially with the ending and stuff. But I like the fact it's not straight away. It happens, and then they balance it out. He's 36 inches tall and 52 pounds for a period, and then it's sort of like, oh, we're going to deal with that. Like, we're going to spend time and sort of ruminate on what it means to be that size and that sort of thing. Is interesting. Yeah,
I loved that it happens slowly, and at first I was sort of annoyed by it, and I thought, okay, get to. Like, I know he's gonna fight a mouse, isn't he? Like, get to it, right? But we're so used to like Fantastic Voyage, we're used to Ant-Man, we're used to that kind of stuff where somebody gets zapped and suddenly they're at whatever size. This is really a sort of like inciting incident that doesn't need too much explanation, and the rest is just kind of all the implications of, all right, it wouldn't happen fast, right? We're gonna watch those little things. I love the wedding ring slipping off of his finger in the car, and his struggles to sort of with his wife, and then the fact that he becomes a media curiosity. He's a celebrity. There's reporters parked outside his home. He can't leave. This is all really that sense of just sort of taking its time, showing the implications. It's not just jumping ahead and in an illogical way. Like, we all know you want to get to the fight with a small animal, but I mean, these days it would just cut right to that. Give us but it's the taking its time to get there that I really admire.
But one of the things I like, and I agree, I do actually. I'm the same as you. When it first started to be a bit of almost like a slow burn. I mean, it's not a long film. It's sort of like barely 90 minutes. I I was a bit like, oh, is this going to be just a climax that's going to have the the honey, I've shrunk the kids kind of element? But the thing that I appreciate as well is it doesn't have it doesn't want to sort of skirt over things, and what they've done is they've given the attention to detail. So there's actually sort of like, even when he is sort of like only partly height, or even when he sort of before he gets to that 36 inches and stuff, like they're going to have an increased size of set. Like they have the scene of him just walking past the sofa, and the sofa's bigger, or chairs are bigger, and like that it's not just saved when he's really small. They're like, no, we've got to have this thing of him looking this height. We want to make that look feel weird and stuff like that. And I think that's what's really cool is when they do have that, the scene where he's kind of like, the really weird one is when his brother confronts him and sort of says, like, this is, as you said, this is going to get out. This is already going to be reported on. People are willing to buy it. Like, you need to take advantage of this. It's going to happen. Like, get paid for it. And it pans round and is there like a child sat with his legs sort of sticking out of the chair and stuff. And it's kind of like, it looks silly, but you kind of quickly get the implications of like, oh, this is like happened, and like it's dramatic, and it works in a kind of sort of both silly and serious way.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that, he's lost his job at this point.
Yeah.
That's sort of the beginning of that scene. So, he kind of has to sell a story. So, you see financial pressures, you see him cooped up in the house, you see obviously that marriage kind of falling apart. Although it's never said, it's clear that, he feels less like a man, that he,
short man syndrome comes out later. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's I think all of that is very interesting. Again, it's kind of subtle. They could maybe do more with it. But I agree with you that obviously they sort of have to justify that he sort of stops at that point to build the sets for a particular size, right? But those sets look great. And you're right, it looks weird, but it's pretty consistent. It looks weird, but then your eyes adjust to it and you say, right, this is how it would look if this is the way it was happening as it's depicted in the movie. So I really do like that stuff. I think that's really where I started getting sold on, the narrative.
Well, I like the fact it stops him at that height, the 36 inches and 52 pounds kind of thing, because it gives him that sense of hope and stuff, because the doctors are like, we stopped it, like this is it. And so it's the fact that at that point he starts to adapt, and he's like, okay, well, if I'm going to be this, then you can see that like, he has that scene where it's sort of how do I go on, and he sort of runs out. And again, yes, the rear projection and the superimposition of this, it's made in 1957, doesn't always look good. It never really looks good, but I get what they're trying to do. But then it's the fact he runs into the party and he sees a freak show, and they have this thing of sort of like the tallest man and the shortest woman, and they're doing all that, and they're calling them freaks, and you are like, it hits him, and he's sort of like, he's there and he's upset by it. And you're like, yeah, this is, kind of upset. It's rightfully upsetting.
And it's sort of like, is this the only thing I'm suitable to do in this society now, right? Like, I can't hold down a job. I don't feel like a man. Should I join am I going to have to join a freak show? I mean, in addition to not being clear where they are on that boat, it's not clear sort of where they live, but apparently there's a freak show within walking distance, that has dwarves, little people.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's the other thing about this. There is someone literally. Well, we'll get to it in a second, but because then he runs to the cafe and he's drinking a coffee, and again, like, they've got the big sets, and they introduce a woman,
Clarice.
And this was kind of funny. Clarice Bruce. And they have this sort of, again, superimposed bits where Billy Curtis, who is a known sort of short person actor, who's obviously, did lots of, been quite busy. I've looked at his thing, but he's simply there credited as midget. And obviously this is So, different time. I'm not saying it's good, right, or wrong with, but like that's what he's credited as. And then she refers to herself as a midget, but obviously the little people. I'm not entirely. On all honesty, because they're not. There's the thing. She does not. She does not have dwarfism. She's not. She is a normal actress that they've then put next to him in the enlarged set. And I can't help going thinking, I thought at one point I was like, she comes in with this coat, and I was like, oh my god, has it happened to her too? Like, because she's got fully, sort of like she's clearly just a normal actress that they put
quote unquote normal proportions.
Yeah, and there's no sort of I'm treading very carefully, but there's no sort of signs of dwarfism or those sorts of things. And so it was for a second I was like, oh my god, are we going to find out that this woman's experienced the same ailment? And then she's like, no, and she refers to herself as a midget and says, but I do this and that, and we have this community and we do that. And you're like, oh, hang on, this is a positive thing. Like, they're going to talk about support. And I was kind of surprised.
There's a Australian show called You Can't Ask That. That's really quite good. It's quite worth seeing. It's on Netflix, at least over here. And basically every episode is a different group, tragedy survivors, transsexuals, any sort of group that might be interested in. And one is little people. And there's one guy on there who's really proud of, having quote unquote normal proportions, and they talk about it very frankly. I do feel like the casting of April Kent as Clarice is a mistake, because as you say, it does seem like, is this happened to her? She's obviously a actress sitting in the same giant sets, right? As he is. And I think that makes it seem as if he would fit in better, right? Because she has those proportions. And obviously she's attractive, she represents maybe if he ditched his wife and joined the circus, he would have this love interest in Clarice.
Carry on.
Yeah. But we'll edit that out. But I mean, I think today there would be protests that they should have cast another little person in that role. What's interesting is I think that would have enhanced the film to have cast another little person in that role.
I agree.
Along with Billy Curtis.
No, and that's because we could see it. You could edit around it. You could do those kinds of things, and I think it would work better. Because it does feel, it's like I say, it's kind of off-putting, because I was thinking, as you said, I'm like, oh, as you said, does she shrink as well? Is this sort of, and then they do start talking about it, and stuff. And this comes to the sort of the weird part of this. They dance around it a little bit, because again, this is the problem with the timescales on this, right? Because again, I like that it takes. This isn't an instant thing. It takes a time. Because they then meet, because he's writing a book about his experience. He's obviously had some sort of
publishing deal, or
he's had a publishing deal. He's probably had an advance. Like, he's writing a book about his experiences, which kind of becomes the narration for one part, and then towards the end, I'm confused, because I'm like, well, actually, who's he narrating this to now if he's not writing the book? But that's besides the point. I like the fact that it takes time. However, some of the time jumps are hard to guess, and they sort of give you little bits and pieces. But I'm like, is this months? Is this weeks? Is this days? Like, and there is one where it then cuts to him meeting meeting Clarice again on this bench in a park. It's an enlarged park, and they put it on a bench, and they put it next to a massive tree, so it looks sort of like thing, and it's all good. And he's talking about his book, and she's read it, and she said, like, no, this is great. This is, this is you talking about this. It's good to be getting this stuff out there. And then he says that he jumps down and sees that he was taller than her in the cafe, but now she's slightly taller than him when they are talking at this bench. And he says, I met you 2 weeks ago and I was taller than you, and da da da. So it gives you sort of that time frame. But it's the fact that, like, that's never, like, it kind of feels like you said, like, is he willing to run away with her? Is this an affair. Like I'm kind of not so much confused, but I'm a little bit like, oh, but what was this? Was he legit just feeling better and he was willing to sort of stay with Louise, or is this an affair? Is it, like, it doesn't want to sort of give you more than just that surface of like, he's like, oh, you've given me a reason to sort of live again, and I'm like, in what way? Is it like that he's got a community that's able to support him and there are more people like him, or is it the fact that he's falling in love with them? Like, I don't. It doesn't feel explored enough in this moment to be,
Yeah, ultimately, it's kind of a distraction. I mean, it's sort of this little interlude when he thinks he might be frozen at a height, right?
Yeah.
She's obviously a love interest, right? I mean, I don't think they consummate it, but obviously there's tension there. Obviously, she's a potential love interest, and I think that it, she sort of represents this sort of like if only alternate path, right? That
Yes.
if his height had stabilized and kept there, he probably would have run away from his Louise and his wife and, joined the circus and, went with there's this whole other direction that this movie could go, right? And we sort of see, and maybe that adds to the tragedy that we sort of see that.
One of us.
Google gobble.
Yeah.
Todd Browning's Freaks, a great movie. Everyone should see. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I mean, I think she represents that sort of alternate path, right?
Yes.
And she's very white and blonde and clean and very, she has all the stereotypical kind of, well, both of these women do sort of stereotypical, 50s, 60s looks. But as you say, he realizes, oh shit, I'm still shrinking.
Yeah.
What did you think about this little interlude with Clarice?
I wish there'd been more of it. It felt like there should be more follow-up on this, because it feels like it should be that temptation to leave his wife, that there is more, like, I've got a new life, I can adapt, I can, like, almost like, because he talks about, in the next thing, he talks about releasing Louise from the burden of having to sort of, be with him. And it feels like that should have almost been a part of the last section, where it's sort of like, oh, I can have this other life. Like, I can have a purpose. I can write this book. I can do this. I can do that, and be a part of this community. And that would all be fantastic. And I think that should have been more overt and stuff. Because you're right. It feels like a distraction in order to just basically have this, like this cliffhanger moment, this sort of like, the reveal at the end that he's still shrinking. It seems just to lead up to that. But it shouldn't. It should have more. Like, it should have more weight to it, really.
I think you're right. I think it's sort of like it adds a bit to his tragedy, but it's still his tragedy. And I think one of the things that I like so much about this film is that, in some sense, it's really the tragedy of a marriage. I'm pushing it a little bit, but really, this is the story of a marriage falling apart. With a sci-fi twist, but I love that through line there, and I think that you mentioned the timeline being sort of ambiguous. We don't really see him go back to the doctor after he realizes that he's getting shorter, but we also don't see how Louise is reacting to him, presumably over a series of days, leaving to go meet Clarice.
Yes.
Have they had a conversation about it? Has he confided to Clarice, like, it's not a secret I have a wife? And as you say, you could front load that dialogue about wanting to release Clarice, like she's sort of, what kind of man can I be for her? I feel guilty. You could have more of that discussion, and you could see their marriage straining. And I think, Louise really needed to be given a little more interior space here to make this really that story of a marriage, the story of both of them, as opposed to just really his story. But, it is the 60s. So,
Yeah. Well, the other thing is it has that character of the brother who sort of like miraculously appears to be there for the his brother's wife, and I'm always a bit like, there's never talk of like of Charlie Carey having a family or a wife. It's kind of like, it kind of feels like he's waiting in the wings a little bit, which feels kind of creepy. But yeah, I wish there would be more of that.
Yeah, you wonder if the brother has banged Louise in the upstairs bedroom, hoping that little Robert Scott Carey in his dollhouse hasn't heard. Yeah, I mean, you're right. It is a little, he's swooping in here.
Yeah, and I think there should be this almost like a love triangle, or there's something there that this needs to be explored more for you to feel that sort of tension. And again, yeah, I would love it if there had been a discussion about him going off to meet Clarice, and him actually saying like, "Look, you're right," or whatever. Like, we need to just, this needs to be right, but I think I have a future. I just don't think it's with you, or some. I don't know. There's to be something that sort of has that sort of, because then he does. Because again, we don't have. You say about there's obviously a 2-week period where he's met Clarice, and then you have this discovery, and then we have, and let's say he shrank by 2 inches over 2 weeks, if that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the next thing is him living in a doll's house, and I'm like, well, how long has that taken? Is that days or weeks or months? Or how long is that? Is that?
Yeah, presumably, if he has resumed the full week, inch a week, presumably that's 30 weeks later or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's if he's at full speed. But I like what you say about this brother, that really, I think it's the brother's boat in the beginning.
It is, yes.
So the brother is sort of more financially successful, right?
It's his company.
Right, so that could play into the whole, sort of like, well, I never measured up to my brother. Yeah. He always had a thing for you. Maybe, maybe it's better. You should just, be together and leave me to die in my dollhouse.
Yeah. Well, go the other way, like have it where it's all sort of a little bit more ambiguous. But then when we get to the end, and we'll talk about when he's really small and there's the flooding, like have it that like the brother does see him and kind of thinks like, all right, well, let's just, I a bit like the end of the 1950s Fly, where they sort of see the fly with the human head and end up sort of crushing it. A similar thing where he's sort of like, no, too late now. You're not, I'm not saving you. Louise can't save you. You're better off dead. I'm going to leave you to drown or to do whatever. And then we go to the sort of like the finale, the final part of the film. I don't know. I think I would get more from that if there was a bit more.
Yeah.
Depth
or at least some ambiguity there.
Yeah.
It's like, did he see him? Did he not? It's pretty clear he doesn't in this version. But I think this is the sort of like, all these themes are there. Much more than in Creature from the Black Lagoon, where like there is that love triangle, but it's really just kind of nothing. Here there's a love triangle, but it's set up. It's the guy's, the brother's company, the brother's boat. Robert Scott Carey has this love interest on the side that doesn't work out. It needs to have more of that connective tissue to enhance those themes, but at least those themes are all there. There's nothing contradicting them or making me feel like they're just totally an afterthought, but they're not fleshed out to really make this the story of a marriage or a love triangle, which I think would help it quite a bit.
Yeah. Competing brothers and all that kind of stuff. Like, yeah. No, I agree. I think it'd be good. There is this thing as well, like say when he is this kind of living in the doll's house, and Louise is going out. Where are you going? What are you doing? And he actually acknowledges, and she's almost going to the corner shop, and she'll be back. And he acknowledges that sort of, like, he says, "Oh, as I got smaller, I became more tyrannical around Louise, or of Louise." And I'm thinking, like, how? Like, because usually that tyranny, that sort of threat, comes with the threat of violence. Do you know what I mean? Like, if there's going to be a sort of a tyrannical or sort of controlling husband, it usually comes with that threat of the fist or something. What if like, what's his threat at this point?
Yeah, I don't know if I like this or I don't. I know exactly what you mean. Like, for listeners at home, Scott is not saying that men should beat their wives.
No,
And,
not at all. No.
That it's.
But the sentiment that's been played out in the film is that the way Louise reacts to him when she has to explain where she's going, because he says, where are you going? How long are you going to be? And she just says, I won't be long. I'm just going to the corner shop, or the shop in the corner, or whatever. Her response is kind of nervous and fearful, like, as if she is in a sort of an abusive relationship or in a controlling relationship. But the point being is sort of like that abuse or that control is about power, isn't it? It's about, it usually comes from an element of power. But like, it feels wrong in this position because he's only like 3 inches tall. And she's sort of like, I don't get it. It feels wrong. I mean, I get his.
I don't know. I don't feel that way. I think it's a choice. I mean, I think that he could become more withdrawn. Yeah, like you could go different directions, right? And different psychologies are going to go different directions. He could become more withdrawn and more tolerant of her because he feels powerless and thinks she'd be better off if he just died. Yeah. On the other hand, he could I think the idea is that he overcompensates, and the Napoleon complex kicks in, and the more powerless he feels, he finds himself becoming more tyrannical. I mean, perhaps tyrannical is the bad word because it implies power, as you say.
Yeah.
But maybe, abusive. People can be verbally abusive without being physically abusive, and people can stay in relationships that are bad because they feel obligated. And I think there are those lines about how she'd be better off if I just had the courage to kill myself, and I can't stop myself being a jerk basically to her. And I don't know why. He clearly still loves her and, is thinking about dying for her benefit, but can't keep himself from being a dick. And I kind of like that dynamic. I kind of.
Yeah. And I get why he's angry and, frustrated and confused and lost and that sort of thing. And I know, they make a choice. I get that. But it kind of feels like, again, I think this is because Louise doesn't have that interior space, that we don't get to explore how she really feels about this situation. But even like a few seconds of her when she gets out the door to be like, oh, I'm so glad I'm outside. I'm away from, whatever. Like, however she's sort of feeling.
Just crying, taking a moment to breathe right outside the door. He sees the toll this is taking on her, that she's,
Yeah, and confusion. I mean, you almost need her to be having a conversation with someone else, to be saying like, I don't know, where I go with this. Like, is in sort of like, what, because again, they've sort of had this conversation about obligation. Like, he's actually said to her earlier on about releasing her and stuff, and she said about, as long as you've got the wedding ring on your hand, then I'll be by your side. It's kind of like, I've made this commitment, where do I stand? Like, what do I do next? Like, she almost needs to have that conversation of like, well, I'm going to stay, but like, I'm thinking about, are there other ways?
Yeah, I mean, I think there needs to be more of that interior space for sure. I wonder what happened to that wedding ring. Like, does he keep it in the doll's house? Wouldn't that be great if you follow up and you see that, I mean,
where's it? There's a big belt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing, not to get all perverted here, but I mean, you remember there was that issue of the Avengers in like the early 2000s that got censored with Ant-Man going down on the Wasp when he shrank. And I found myself wondering about this because obviously this is the 60s and they can't address these things. And I don't mean to turn this into like a XXX porn parody or something.
No, just I should say, I think that was Ultimate Avengers, or the Ultimates.
No, it was in the main. It was in the main line. That was part of the controversy.
Wow. Okay.
And then they censored it for the trade paperback collection. They just made it a line different or took those pages out or something. But no, it was the main line
of
Avengers.
Well,
I don't remember if it was.
It feels like a
Bendis.
Mark Millar kind of thing to do. To be perfect.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. I don't know that it was Bendis. But yeah, it was in that sort of era, maybe right before Avengers Dissembled. But when he's shrinking, when he's at that, you cut to the 3-foot level, and he is clearly upset that he's not as much of a man. You don't look, this is the 60s, so you don't get the RoboCop lines in the 80s
50s.
of RoboCop 2, do you think you could satisfy her the way a man needs to satisfy her? Right? You can't have that dialogue in 67, right? But that's clear, right? And obviously, I mentioned that episode of You Can't Ask That, where they talk about sex, right? I mean, that's exactly the point of that kind of show, where people write in and say, how do you have sex? Can you satisfy a normal woman? And they say, I got no problems, brother. It's not all about the size, but because you think they're married, certainly they would try. Are they just not having sex? Is that because Gary is so hung up on his size, and I know I don't want to turn this into a weird thing, but I did find myself wondering,
But no, it's a good point. No, because it's true. I mean, it's if he was to stay at that 3-foot level, the 36 inches, that becomes a question. And is that why he's more attracted to going off with Clarice? Because it makes more sense. I'm not less of a man if I'm people of equal sort of size and stature. That's kind of what it sort of suggests he's sort of thinking. But
I was going to joke, I had this joke prepared that, this movie was about, when I go into a cold beach water. But that is basically, it does seem that is a thing that he's anxious about. Now, look, obviously, I would hope that if they're in a loving sexual relationship, it wouldn't be that big of a deal for him to be 3 feet tall. They could salvage this. They clearly love each other, but he's messed up. So that suggests they're not having sex, right? He's too shy to do that.
Yeah.
And so that's why he feels it's not really her complaint. It's that he feels that he's got to be with somebody his own size, right?
Yes.
He feels less of a man, literally and figuratively. And so I do think this is sort of like a subtext going on here.
Yeah. And the brother coming in and being, owner of the business, some more powerful, taller, so on and so forth. Yeah. No, I think it's there. Definitely.
He's a symbolic bigger dick.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest, right? This is what's going on.
Yeah. And it deals. I mean, I agree. It's definitely there, and it tries to deal with it, and it does deal with it. And then, it sort of says, right, we're now kind of done with all that. Now into the fun stuff, now into the crazy bit.
Well, I think what's interesting to me is it definitely goes into I remember all those Savage Adam comics from the 80s where he would shrink down and have a sword and be fighting, and it was it never is as entertaining as you think it's going to be, right?
Yeah.
So strangely, if characters go to a giant planet and they're small and they're fighting like a giant rat on it, it's more entertaining than having somebody shrink down and you're like, yeah, I know that's a mouse, right? It just doesn't feel as entertaining for some reason. But what I was going to say is that I really love that it doesn't fully drop the wife storyline.
No.
And that is a huge part of what I love about the ending. It's less the swashbuckling and problem solving and more, the wife and brother sort of giving him up for dead.
Yeah, which sort of starts it. That's a good point. We'll get to that because I do think that's interesting how the sort of his despondency at the end is kind of this weird sort of part of all that. But this first attack, whilst he's sort of sat in the Louise has got the door open and the cat gets in because it's windy outside or whatever. She gets out and it's their cat. Should highlight it's not just a random cat. They do have this cat. He's in the doll's house and this cat's like, "Hey, oh, this smells good," and we get this attack on the doll's house. I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of silly, but also strangely effective.
It is really cool.
It is really cool. Yeah, no, I liked it. With
It
the
made me
paw coming
think
through
of-
the ceiling, through the window, and it's shaking up the thing and stuff. I don't know how they made the cat do this. Like, is there catnip like smeared on things? I don't know, but it's kind of effective.
I wondered about that too. One key thing is that the cat keeps meowing, like threateningly, which cats don't do naturally. Cats really only meow for their mothers or for humans because humans are so sound oriented, right? But in the wild, cats basically never meow. So that is like a human adjusted thing. So whatever they're doing to get this cat to do it, like it knows that I'm doing this for humans, right?
Yeah.
But you're right. There's something about like the way cats they play with their, prey and are so just, cat play is so entirely predatory practice, right? That is really horrifying to think of a human being put in that position. And it reminds me of like the dream of 1,000 cats in Sandman, where you see that the cats used to prey on these tiny humans, but the humans dreamed and flipped the tables. I agree. It's sort of strangely effective.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. I mean, the cat again, the rear projection and stuff isn't always great, but the fact that this continues as well in a sort of, it's not just a. This is why I think I like about this film is they do sort of prolong things. It's not just a quick attack and then they'll go on and go, "Oh my god, that was thinking we should," like used to like this TV show like Land of the Giants or The Borrowers. There'll be something like that, but it'll be over relatively quick. This one's like prolonged, like it's in the doll's house. He escapes the doll's house, having had his back all scratched up by the cat, runs across the room and hides under a sort of a desk, and then is being sort of stalked there and has to pull a lamp down to escape that. Then heads to the basement, and you get the bit where he's holding the door, trying to hold the door shut, and the cat's paw and face are coming through the door. I think special effects aside, from 1957, I'm going to give it its due. But like, no, from a tension point of view, I was like, I'm into this. This is good. This is well paced, well structured, good ideas. So, no, I was enjoying it. I thought it worked really well.
I agree, and I think the paws kind of creeping through the door and twisting around. Cats are so agile that way. Is really horrifying. The scratching of him is less successful with the rear projection.
Yeah.
But I got to give Jack Arnold credit here. I think that one of the things that makes him such a successful director from this period is that he, basically he is the Marvel director of his time.
Yes.
He is. Yes. He knows how to do FX movies. And he's not, another director would say, I don't know how to do this. We're going to minimize that cat attack. Jack Arnold is the guy who goes, I know how to do this. Let's really sell this. Let's go for it. And he does that in all of these movies. And I think that's, his genius, if you want to say, as a director.
Yeah, no, full to his credit. Like, there is this, like you say, they don't skimp on, like you say, they've gone, this is an idea. This is how we're going to do it. And even like the inclusion or the mixture of sort of effects. So there is the rear projection or the superimposition of a film, but there's also like Scott Carey hiding behind a chair leg. Obviously like a much larger representation of a chair leg, but with rear projection behind that and stuff. So they really are trying to give you that sense of he's trapped in this room. I just think, fair play. I think, Jack Arnold does a really good job. It then sort of comes to a head though with Louise comes home, and the wind blows and the cat sort of comes away from the door, but as the door sort of blows open, the cellar door, it pushes Scott off the steps and into a box full of rags and stuff.
Quite a long fall.
Oh yeah. Again, this is something I want to come to. So we've seen him in this attack, and he's wearing this sort of white vest, and he's these trousers, and he's clean shaven. Like, he's clean, and he's sort of, I'm not sure how he's shaving at that height, or I'm maybe going to think about the science of it, but he looks clean shaven. But then when Louise finds the little piece of material with the blood on and sees the cat licking its paw, I think this is kind of underplayed. I think she's like, "Oh my God, Scott," and she gets all upset. I'd be like, "Oh, fuck. Our cat has just eaten." Like, I'd be horrified. I don't know how, like, that should be so much more played up than just a sort of like, "Oh, this is tragic, Scott's dead." It just feels like that should be like really played up. Like, I know she cries and there's the grief of for a dying husband, but yeah, no, there's no sort of thing of like how
this
horrific.
Was a terrible death.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. And that cat probably, Butch the cat probably played with my husband before eating him. I mean, should we X-ray the cat to see if there are tiny human bones in the cat's gut?
Should I? Yeah, but we know what cats do with birds. I mean, you said even this evening about your cat Tangy sort of has brought you a gift. Like, should I check my bed, or should we check somewhere else for like a sort of a
little head of
like a mutilated Scott Carey corpse? Like, it feels a little, I say, underplayed. Like, it really should be horrific. Like, this bit should really feel horrific, and I don't think it's played up enough for what it implies.
I agree 100%, and I think it's sort of handled slightly in dialogue. I mean, they sort of, she seems upset. There's a line about sort of that implies that she understands it was a terrible death. But that's about it, right? I agree with you. It should be played up. Also, they refer in dialogue to having searched the house extensively. Right?
Yeah,
we need to see that, right?
Yes.
Frantic we need looking. The montage, yes, of like looking for the body, looking for part of the body. Looking for being scared of seeing, like, I'm gonna open the cupboard and I'm going to see a little human hand, separate hand that the cat has left. Because, one thing about cats is they're not meat eaters.
No.
They fling their food around and they, dogs will eat every morsel and lick the floor when they're done. Cats will leave little pieces.
Yeah.
So, this needs to, and I think that would do a lot to add to this drama here.
I agree. I think it needs, that'd be quite cool, that sort of like frantic looking, and then a couple of, at least one moment of tension of the sort of uncovering something, and then you get the relief to see it's not, like it's a doll's hand or something left.
Yeah, that's quite a good idea.
Yeah.
Or part of a dead insect or something,
Yes. Yeah, something the cat's left behind before or something. It feels like it should be doing more. And then it kind of drops that, and it does come back to Louise and Charlie, but like for the vast majority of the next time, it sticks with Scott. And this is what I want to question. He wakes up in the box full of rags, and we get this narration, which I kind of like. I'm still wondering like who he's narrating to, because he's not writing that. Because before it was the book, like the book was the narration. Now it's not. But he's now like not clean shaven. He's got like stubble and this other stuff. So I'm like, cool. How long has this been? Like, how long was he unconscious for? Is this a day? Is this several days? Like,
doesn't he say when he wakes up, like, because Louise and the brother have gone off, like they're doing stuff. She's packing up they're talking about moving out. And then Robert Scott Carey wakes up, so I think there's a line that it's like been a week or something like that. Like it's sort of implied he's been unconscious for a while.
Yeah, that's what I thought, but I wasn't. I must have missed something because it feels like it feels like a while. Yeah,
It feels like at least several days, if
yes,
not a week. I don't know how
yeah,
we would know how much time has passed.
no, no, no. But I like this when it then has this as you said, the problem solving then comes into play of like, okay, well, I've got to get out of this box, and then I've got to do this, and then I've got to find shelter, and then he comes across water because the water heater's leaking and things like that, and he now lives in a matchbox and stuff like, and he uses one of the rags as clothing and stuff like. I like all this when he's sort of like, he's still planning on returning, like he's still hoping to be saved, but he knows he's got to sort of survive in this cellar, and it's obviously like this vast dark area, and that kind of is
He
kind of
calls it
scary.
it's like a plane, but of
Yes.
course, he talks about it as if it's this vast plane, and of course made of concrete, and I like that he finds like the drips of the water heater, which are enormous to him,
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I've got food, I've got shelter, well, I've got water, I've got shelter, now I need food. The food stuff I find less convincing. There's a piece of cheese left on a mousetrap.
I like that scene. That was good.
Except that cheese is going to be really gross,
Yes.
right? And and then it winds up being a piece of discarded cake that's sort of near the spider. And I think, and they sort of treat it as if it's rock that he kind of, pokes it with his.
It's gone stale and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. But again, it should be more disgusting. It should be, like the texture of the cheese and the cake, like it's going to be so old and decayed that like you're going to be scared. You're going to have to eat it, but you're as likely to get sick,
Well, he should be desperate. He sort of, because the narration says about, my legs are trembling, not from tiredness, but from hunger or and weakness, and stuff like that. And I think that's kind of, they get the thing across. So there's almost like a desperation for the food, but it never quite says like I'm on the verge. He sort of keeps alluding to the fact like I'm on the verge of starvation, but like it's never really 100% there. But I love the fact that he's sort of like, at first he like runs at it and almost like, like a mouse or a rodent would, and then sort of stops himself, and then sort of, he's trying to get the cheese, and then the sort of the mechanism starts to twitch. So he gets the nail, and he's like, okay, well, if I could just set this thing off, then I'll get it. Like, there's an ingenuity, which is kind of like, oh, that's why humans are able to survive things, because we do have this ingenuity and things. So I like that. It doesn't quite work, and then he tries it a bit of other ways and stuff, and then, but yeah, no, I thought that was kind of cool. The fact that again they have this massive mousetrap that he's sort of climbing on and stuff is cool.
Yeah, I like the ingenuity. I like, even though obviously there are scaling problems, right? Like he fits in a, matchbook box, but then obviously like he's climbing up wooden slats that are clearly, several inches more than,
yeah.
But I do like the sense of ingenuity and the sense of like, this is what defines humans. We use tools. He's able to fashion, a sword and a kind of grappling hook. That's all really, good stuff. He's able to climb and, problem solve. I'm not always 100% convinced, but I like what it's saying about humanity. I think with a mousetrap thing, like, I feel as if he's really taking life and limb, into risk here, the way he approaches that mousetrap. I would think, I don't want to step on that thing. I don't know how much pressure, I can remove, because, of course, the reality is this is a trap that snaps you in half.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like, it is not fun to be a mouse snapped in half by
it's not
flying...
humane. It is not a humane way to go. No.
And that should be heightened, right? I mean, like at the risk of, invoking animal cruelty, right? I mean, that is implicit in that scene, but it really seems to want to avoid that. I think that's kind of my one complaint about that.
Yeah, I mean, you almost want to see another trap that's gone off and killed something, and see like this is what it can do, and like it needs to be kind of gory or kind of like shocking to be like, oh shit, like he's this size, like if this hits him, like
in a post-Saw hostile landscape, we need a little bit of Cronenberg body horror here,
yes. Sad of
yeah.
But again, I you're right. I think I wouldn't be able to climb it, but I would do the bit where he gets the nail and starts trying to hit it from a distance. I'm like, that's cool. That's the bit where that's the thought process that's gone into it. And I agree that sort of the thought around having the grappling hook and the sword out of a pin and all these other bits is cool. I like that, and sort of. But again, like this thing of scale, I'm less bothered by. I recognise it's there, but I'm also like, it would be. I can see how it would be quite difficult to do, and also from a dramatics point of view, like you have to have certain things. But I like the bit like when he does climb up to get to the cake. There's the bit he gets on top of the crate, which he's been climbing up, and there's a gap, and he says like, he even says that this gap is nothing in the grand scheme of things, but to me, it's the Grand Canyon. Like this is almost impassable. And then there's the stick that's obviously been used to stir the paint. Is sort of hardened against the wood. He's going to use that ball. He wants to try and move it, but then he can't because he's not strong enough. And I love there's that thing again. He says, if I was just a little bit bigger or a little bit stronger, or I could move this. And then it can't. But then if he walks out onto it to jump across, and you just see it sort of like moving up. Again, I think like it's that thing of they're working within their limitations, and I was I'm recognizing that, and it's for me like. A lot of this is working. Oh no, this is. It looks good. It looks cool. Like the goo of the drying paint that's holding the stick in place, sort of like, just holding it in place. Yeah, no, it's good.
Yeah, I guess I sort of feel like, if I were in that situation, I would just think, okay, run across the paint stick and jump. It looks quite doable. But he sort of goes slowly and then is stuck in this. Sort of last minute jumping as the paint stick is falling, which, sort of works. It's fine. And then later on, he has to cross the same gap again, and he crosses it quite easily using a totally different method, which sort of invalidates the first one a little bit. But, I do like, you're right. I'm not totally troubled by the size differentials, the inconsistency. But, fundamentally, it's the sense of problem solving and inventiveness of the depictions that you're seeing, that are really good.
Yeah, I do have. He gets the cake, and you find it's covered in. It's got a cobweb sort of working, across it, and you see the spider. Let's be clear: this isn't a spider; it's a tarantula.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'm like, oh no, I know what that's not a domestic kind of. Household.
Yeah, why is that the only animal in your basement? Yeah. Now, okay, Jack Arnold's just done 2 years ago the movie Tarantula, right? Yeah. About a giant tarantula. So, I mean, he knows this is terrifying. But yeah, you're right. I mean, this is I had the same thought. Like, why is there tarantula in your basement?
Yeah. Again, it doesn't invalidate anything, but I do get to the point where I'm a bit like, by having this as a tarantula, yes, it's still scary. It is horrible, and some of the close-ups later on are really well done. But because if it was a regular spider, if this was something like he was competing with a regular, it would make it more scary for me in some reason, because I'd be like, oh shit, this thing actually does live in our house, and it can be quite sort of like a problem. I don't know. Yeah, the tarantula feels like, again, like where they've underplayed the death from the cat, the tarantula feels like a bit of overplay for this thing. But it's still fun. It still works. Tarantula's always creepy and stuff. I would have liked more. I don't want to give the spider a sort of a level of sentience it doesn't have. But I would have liked there to be this, because he basically after he realizes he can't get the cake because of this tarantula, he backs off. He then goes to sleep in his. I mean, we have this whole thing of him sleeping in the he gets chased by the spider and stuff, and he sleeps in the matchbox.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been chased down. It should feel more dangerous. Almost like a competition, or there should be sort of like he even says, like, I came in as the hunter, and I'm now being hunted, and all this other cliche. But it should feel like that. It should feel like going to sleep is actually dangerous. Do you know what I mean? Like, if I'm on my own, I don't have someone watching over my back. I don't have those security measures I used to have. Like, just falling asleep could be the end of me. And there needs the spider needs to feel like a hunting threat, like a lion or something, like a wild animal kind of needs to.
Yeah, I thought there was going to be more of sort of the tarantula sticking its limbs into the matchbox, and him sort of stabbing at the limbs, trying to inflict some damage there. And instead, the tarantula, he sort of sees it through the matchbox opening, but the tarantula basically just can't get in there and leaves him alone. So yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the other thing is, like, there should be, whether it's a cockroach or a mouse, we know there's a mouse trap. I mean, there should be some other animal down there with him besides the tarantula, right? Or, an ants, like, imagine seeing ants the size of, cats, and the cockroach is the size of a dog, and they're not necessarily threats, but it's weird,
There needs to be like a different
ecosystem. Weirdness.
Like a different ecosystem exists down there that he sort of like he's entering and has to survive or traverse. I mean, that's, to be fair, that's kind of what Honey, I Shrunk the Kids does.
Yeah,
they take this and go, let's up the they up the special effects for the early 90s and sort of they end up riding ants, and that's kind of like, that's cool. Of course, Disney are going to do that, but yeah, I don't. It feels like very isolated in this thing, but if that's what it is, then it needs to feel dangerous. That this, this spider. The reason that this is isolated is because the spider eats anything that comes into its territory.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, it's still good. It's still fine, but I just wish again they could have played this up a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean the same thing.
Mm.
So I'm not sure why the water heater happens to burst when it does, right? I like that it's leaking. So he's survived the tarantula, and he sort of falls asleep in the matchbox. And then I like this set of the matchbox just covered with damp, and flooding, and it looks like, oh yeah, that's made of cardboard, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's not secure. This is not a safe spot that he thought it was. And then, of course, you have this, this water heater burst. I wish that, like, a water heater bursting is a big deal in a house. I wish that was somehow related to his actions, that wasn't just accidental.
Or even it needs to have been spoken about before.
Yeah.
Like, we need, like, Chekhov's water heater, where saying, like, him sort of saying, like, at some point earlier on, like when he's sort of at the 36-inch high, I'll get to it. I've got other things on my mind rather than the water heat. Do you know what I mean? Sort of like, him. Yeah, he's not dealt with it because of what's gone on.
Well, I thought that it would be interesting if he himself burst the water heater to try to get them to come downstairs. But it seems to be totally accidental.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he's got matches. I kept thinking, like, wouldn't you start a small fire, hoping that would attract, like, if he just started the matchbook, paper on fire, try to get somebody to come downstairs. They're going to look at the fire, right? If you're standing next to the fire, that's the way to get seen.
Yeah.
How do I start a fire big enough to get attention, but not big enough to burn the house down?
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought it was going to go in one of those directions or something. Instead, he's just waiting it out, hoping that they come downstairs and find food instead.
Yes.
See, I'd be like, I'm not eating that old cake. How can I start a fire?
Yeah. Which, to be fair, does sound like a more reasonable approach. You're like, okay, if I start a fire, they'll smell fire, they'll come down and figure it out. And 8 seconds done there. He's just come out. He basically cuts his way out of a box of rags. Like, drag a load of those into the middle of the floor so they're not near anything, and set those on fire. Like, I'm sure there must be ways of doing that kind of thing. So yeah, no, I agree. But
arrange the rags into the word help.
Yeah.
The giant word help in the middle of the floor,
Yes.
Let them know. Okay.
But you're right, the water heater happens. It's again a good sort of scaled scene where he gets sort of like rushed away by the water and grabs onto a nail and all that kind of thing. And then Louise and Charlie come downstairs and they're like, oh no, the water heater. Charlie, and this shoes may have been better made in 1957. But Charlie just seems to wade into this water with his shoes on, and I was just like, those shoes are ruined, or at least like leaking like mad. But he turns it off and then clears the drain, and he kicks water that's sort of like, Scott's holding onto this pencil that's floating on in the water, and he clears the drain, and it is actually the thing that's covering it at this point is the rags that Scott was using as his sleeping covers and that sort of thing. So I like that they just sort of throw them aside, these wet rags and stuff, and don't even think about or comment on it. And then just walk off. But then he's sort of swept unconscious, and the pencil's kind of what saves him from being pulled down into the drain. So again, it's fine. Again, it's all good. It's all scaled, and it allows Louise to finish her story, because she's down there to get this suitcase, and then you can hear them both say, we're not coming back. She's got everything. She's able to leave. And again, I think it's underplayed. It should feel more like, can we not do one last look? We need to do this. We need to do something. And she's kind of just resigned to it at this point.
It's kind of heartbreaking, though. I mean, I agree it's underplayed, but I think that given that Scott's the main character, he yells out. They're too faint for him to hear. He survived the flood, and he survived, being swept into the drain, holding onto the pencil. Again, the scale is a little different, but it should, it is kind of heartbreaking. Like, oh, they're leaving. They're not coming back. My hope of rescue has completely disappeared. Right.
Yes.
And now, in fairness, he does seem to sort of find his macho side. At this point, he recovers and he says, like, I'm oddly okay with it. Like, he's just a warrior at this point. He knows he's got to kill that spider.
I think that's how it was supposed to play in 1957. Right. It kind of plays now like a guy that's broken.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me, I watched it and he was a guy that's sort of gone, fuck it. This is all I've got. I've got no choice, and I'm angry, and I'm now going to go, and I'm going to just. This isn't about I'm recapturing my manliness or the thing I've sort of let. This is now me going, like, I've got nothing left. This is what I've got, and I'm angry about this, and I'm going to do this thing. It feels more about proving something to himself and being angry than, like you say, becoming a macho warrior. That's sort of how it goes, but I don't know. It felt more like a,
desperate.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. I think it wants to be. I think basically the narrative wants to be Scott is exposed to radiation and starts shrinking. He's really worried about his tiny phallus. Yeah. But ultimately, this allows him to discover his masculinity. I mean, this is really, The Incredible Shrinking Man is about masculinity. It's about Scott discovering his true alpha, right? And, the joy of killing a tarantula.
But I suppose it's that thing of shaking off everything that tied him to the modern world and allowing him to. His primal sense is what comes through, I suppose, at the end, and his wife leaving with his brother and stuff is what the last remnants of him being able to go back to that world.
Yeah. And I think that's what it wants to be, right? Yes. But I agree with you that, in our modern context and, contemporary today, this comes off as much more desperate, much more like somebody on a suicide mission.
Yeah,
Than somebody,
that's what I
you
felt.
know.
Like he did not. He wanted to get that cake, but it's kind of like it didn't have to be this. He doesn't have to, because he makes the decision. He goes up and starts pulling on the web. Like, he comes up with a plan, doesn't he? He's like, I can't. He finds a pair of scissors, and he's like, well, I can't kill the spider with the scissors. I can't. They're too heavy to use as a weapon. But I can use this hook to get it into, and then I can push the scissors over the edge, and it'll take the spider with it, and it'll hopefully kill it. I'm not sure that's how it worked. It would have done it, but
right.
It's a plan. It worked. But it feels like I've got a plan. It's kind of ludicrous. I'm fully expecting to die in this situation. So yeah,
and he's clearly comfortable with the possibility of death.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this is the guy who's stranded on a desert island, struggles with it, and eventually says, I need food. I'm gonna kill that alligator, and if it kills me, fine, right? But I'm gonna fight that shark.
So, yeah. 2 shall enter, 1 shall leave.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. He's gone full Mad Max at this point. He's dirty. He hasn't fashioned strange garb out of the matchbook yet, but I was hoping clearly a step away.
Yeah, the next scene he should have a mohawk and be wearing a
Acid
mouse
shafts made of cardboard.
That's it. Yeah,
a mouse skull. If George Miller had directed the Drinking Man,
I'm manifesting that now. But it is. It becomes the fight. But I like, again, as you say, he goes up the crate. You've seen the tarantula. I mean, there's some good shots of the tarantula just climbing up that thing, and as you say, sort of the way that they choose to shoot the tarantula. Yes, it's kind of out of place because it's clearly not a household spider. But they, and I don't feel they've made it the threat I think it would be. But when they shoot it, like, it feels like a monster, and he refers to it as the spider monster. So I think Jack Arnold knows how to shoot this thing to make it maximize its scariness. And it does, because when he sort of goes up and starts to threaten it, and the plan goes to pot, as it obviously should do, because he hooks it up, he manages to do that, and then pushes the scissors off, and the scissors get stuck in the rope, or cotton or string or whatever it is, gets caught in the concrete. It snaps and the scissors fall, but the spider doesn't. When you've got that it gives the close up of the spider rearing up, and you've got like the tarantula fangs and that stuff. I'm not gonna lie, right? I'm not a big fan of spiders. I'm not hugely bothered, but like that up close shot, it proper sent shivers up my spine. It really did. Sort of something primal in me went, no, I don't like that. That's not fun. No, I'm not happy about this. So it works incredibly well.
I was really sold. I don't know. I was not sold on the web. Like, the web shouldn't just be made of spindly material that holds together and can be snapped around, right? I'm not sold on the fact that the tarantula is so predatory and so territorial. Like, it seems like he's at the base of the web, grab some cakes, man, and run away. Like, you don't have to fight the spider. That only, I can justify it by the fact that maybe he's suicidal and wants the conflict.
That's what felt to me when he starts grabbing the web and he's like, "Come on!" It's almost it's like this is Arnie, sort of like, come on, kill me. This end of Predator. Like, it's that thing, isn't it? Like the last ditch effort. Like, this is him looking for a fight, not to be strategic like he has been in the past.
Yeah, that's the way I read it too. But I will say that I do love the killing of the tarantula. Sort of like it's sort of all is lost and he's underneath the tarantula, and it's these close-ups of sort of like looking up at a tarantula, which is just a great dramatic shot, and he sort of stabs it, and it's sort of like, I love that it's of course it's black and white, but like its guts are like molasses or something. Like they're gooey and gross and black and don't look like blood, and they have that sort of animal gooey grossness to them. and they're sort of spilled on him, and I think that stuff was great.
Yeah, no, I agree. Actually, I think that really worked. And again, I think this comes back to this thing of having done Tarantula. I wouldn't be surprised if they were like, "Oh, we're carrying some of those special effects over." No, it looks good, and I think again, it's a desperate thing. Like it's got the tarantulas crawling over the top of him as he's reaching for the needle, the pin, swords, and all that sort of stuff. Like, no, I think this is the one moment where of all the scenes where they've had like the projection, all that sort of stuff, like this is the one where I completely ignore it, and I'm like, oh, I don't like this. Like this feels like there's a spider crawling on top of himself, and I was thinking just from the edits and the way it's shot, excellently well done. Like, it really creeped me out. I do have a question about the fate of the real spider, and because when its legs are all curled up, and it's like I was like no, I'm not a member of PETA. I'm not but like still,
a spider was killed. I mean, at least one spider was killed in the filming of this, right? I mean, people are not on set rooting for tarantulas.
No, this is wouldn't happen today. There'd all be CG and stuff, but I like that ending. I think it was not the ending, but I like that whole battle. It then kind of feels weird though, because it's sort of all about eating the cake and all about sort of that sort of thing. And he gets to the cake and it's sort of, it's obviously stale and mottled and all this other stuff. And he grabs it. And he says, like, again, like I was covered by a sense of calm and I'm no longer hungry. Hunger is the last thing on my mind. And then you've had this twice now. You've had this sort of moment of him going, well, you've had it already once, this moment of going up to this grill. It's like a grate that goes from the cellar out into the garden, and he's looked at it at one point and looked out, and there's a bird sat in the garden, and you kind of realize that like going out there is actually much more dangerous than being in the cellar, because there's much more life, and that birds could come and eat him and all this other stuff. But the grate, he couldn't get through the grates either. Like the grates are big enough for him to put his hand through, his arms through, but no bigger than that. By the end of the film, he's shrunk further. And again, I don't know if this has been happening, but all of a sudden he's like smaller again. His clothes are sort of loose. I don't know if this is the sense he's feeling, where he's like, I don't feel hungry anymore because I've literally just shrank again in a moment. But now he's able to climb through that grating. And I thought that's a really cool detail, that they've thought about that. Like they've obviously done this in different scales. They've made it look the same. It's not just big and then little. They've done it at different scalings. And then you get that kind of this weird ending. But I wanted to get your thoughts on this first, this ending where it's sort of like he's up there looking at the stars and he gives this sort of monologue about basically
God.
The God part was stupid, but
yeah. Well, I mean, so I think objectively what he's saying is dumb, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he's saying like basically the crux of his argument seems to be, I believe in God. God notices everything and every life has purpose. God sees me even now. I matter. Everything in the universe matters. Therefore, I matter.
Yeah.
The end, right? Even if I fade away to nothingness. But, so, I mean, the actual, argument of what he's saying is vapid and silly. Yes. But it is this kind of like reach to the metaphysical. It is a kind of like way of coping with his own death or very soon non-existence, being microscopic potentially. I think that having this metaphysical sort of turn at the end of the movie works so much better than in Creature from the Black Lagoon, that starts with that kind of evolution stuff, and then that very quickly becomes a backdrop for
the rest of the story,
right?
Yeah.
Here, having it end on that note, I think works a lot stronger for me. having the movie go to someplace interesting as opposed to that being window dressing for a silly story. And the fact that it's still window dressing, but the fact that it is really about his coping with the fact that he will die or soon not exist in some fundamental way. I think it's like, this is a super dark, cynical ending in a way. I kind of really admire it. Like he doesn't get saved.
No,
He just keeps shrinking until he, yeah, I mean, it's a little silly with his talk about how maybe I'm the future, right? Other humans are going to be affected by atomic energy. But the metaphysical stuff, whether you see it as, I mean, I think it's hard to see it as deep and meaningful, even from a Christian perspective. But if you see it as justification for blinking out of existence or acknowledging your death, like, this is a dark fucking place to end this movie.
Yeah, no, I agree. This is the thing. So this is, I have both. I like the idea, but I have problems with the I don't know. The whole God stuff at the end of like, I matter. God sees me, therefore I matter is annoying and ridiculous, and it's of its period. And I would probably say it's, I'm not entirely sure. I haven't read the Matherson book, but it feels kind of a piece of what Jack Arnold kind of does. What's more interesting, though, the two elements that sort of I do find more interesting is him trying to process how he is shrinking, because there is this thing of going like, when do I stop? Like, at what point do I stop being human? Like, what is going on? Because we obviously know they tell this idea before he's shedding. They refer to it as shedding cartilage and all these other bits and pieces. Like that's what he's doing. Okay, so at what point does that stop? Because as you say, it becomes microscopic. Yeah, but he's still made of matter, and matter has a scale. Like at one point, he can't be any smaller than a group of atoms. Like he will become small, but like we still have matter. Like you can become microscopic, or at least to an extent, but he's not going to become like quantum level. Like, this is an Ant-Man. So I'm like, well, how does this work? At what point do you stop? And he has to shed. I like the fact it's not the condensing. We've always had this problem of like, if you shrink something and it's the same mass at a smaller level, then it's a real problem because you're still sort of like the same weight, but much smaller, which means everything starts crushed. That's just how it works. Mm-hmm. All right, so you're then losing. So again, does the gap between the atoms get smaller and all whatever? How does it work? So it kind of sort of gets to this point where even he doesn't know, and it's weird to be like, he's like, I don't know what's going to happen to me. Okay, I like the acknowledgement of like, I don't really know how this works. Don't know what's going to happen to me. Will I blink out of existence? Do I become something else? Like, we don't know. The other point I kind of like as well, which is a brief acknowledgement. He talks about the planets and space, and then sort of says it's almost like a circle. You get the vastness of space and the tiniest thing, without even realizing that he's obviously talking about like, the when you get down to like an atomic level, the gap between a proton and its electron and its nucleus is kind of big, like in relative terms.
Oh yeah.
So, you're talking about sort of like quite large distances of these things circling around a nucleus and all this other stuff. So I was like, that's kind of interesting. I'm not entirely sure that's what they mean, but that's what I'm taking from it. It's the idea of planets circling the sun and sort of thing, similar to sort of like, protons and electrons circling a nucleus of an atom. So that was kind of interesting. But then when it sort of devolves into, and I'm important, damn it, and people, God sees me, and I'm a man, and all that shit. I'm like, oh no, you've kind of fallen off the wagon. But I do like that there seems to be this is like The Fly again. There's a dark ending where they're like, no, we're going to end with this, and actually when we are going to find the fly, and we're going to have to kill it and leave it at that. So I do think it's a cool ending that it leaves on this dark note of he's not saved, and again going back to the Matherson thing of like, with I Am Legend finishes on a really dark note with like the end of civilization, and it's a similar note. So I don't know, I can see why Serling watched this or read like Matheson's books and was like, I would like you to come and do some things for the Twilight Zone because I like your tone. So I like it in its intent and stuff. I just think the content kind of falls short.
Yeah, I think the fact that he doesn't eat the cake and he sort of loses his appetite. I mean, you can see that as, I mean, part of reflecting this problem of he's going to die anyway, and the atoms of the food at some point are going to be a problem.
Yeah, how
if
does he
they're not
digest
shrinking.
at that level? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, these problems we always have with shrinking stories, but it also cements that death wish thing, right? That he, really was looking for meaning or, a good death. And I think that is ultimately where it sort of leaves off, that he's looking for meaning.
Yeah.
And I think that if you want to run, I mean, if the Incredible Shrinking Man is really about masculinity, right? And ultimately he goes to this place of not caring that, his wife is left with his brother, finding purpose in combat. He succeeds and ultimately finds that meaningless too. And the only thing, and he accepts his death, which I think we're supposed to think is a good thing. But you can also see this as like some super toxic masculine bullshit, right? Like, he's been symbolically cuckolded. He's tried to find meaning in violence and, masculine conflict, and ultimately found that shallow and hollow. And ultimately the best he can do is accept his imminent demise. Like, that's some pretty toxic shit.
No, that's that is an incel level kind of sort of like, God sees me and I'm important. I mean, that's kind of it's that's all there is to it. No, I mean, I like that it's dark and it's of a period. I just it's but yeah, you're right. It's the fact it's dark and depressing and leaves off on this thing. I mean, it zooms out as well. I like the show, like it shows he's in between the vegetation and stuff, and you're like, how it shows up how small he's gotten and stuff is kind of cool. But I like that again. I like the tone, but I think the execution is kind of lacking in that sense. Anyway,
the God stuff doesn't help.
No,
I mean, yeah.
I think you and I both go to that point of going like, all right, yeah, you don't need that.
And anyone could say that about anything, right? I mean, I mean, I did murder that school bus full of children, but and I'm dying, in absolute agony, unseen in the middle of the Amazon. But God sees all of this and sees my heart, so it's all okay, right?
God has a plan for all of us. That kind of shit. Yeah, it's a cop out kind of thing. If anything, it should go the other way. To be like, well, there is no God. This is a godless universe, and I'm going to be sort of like, taken out by by an insect. Like, what cruelty is this? But yeah, no, it's an interesting end. I'm glad to see that 50s films. And we said this, like 50s films didn't. There's some that have like ridiculously sort of like super cheesy kind of happy endings, and there's others when you're going like that were still going like no, we can still do some slightly darker stuff. So.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of justify it by sort of a quest for meaning, and it is kind of cosmic, right? I mean, it's like, how do you make sense of atoms? How do you make sense of, I mean,
I wish there was more of that. I wish there was more of that, of going like, what happens to me beyond a certain point of shrinkage? Like, where does that go? What will I see? How will I how do my senses interpret these things when I get to that size? Does time change? Does these things, like that's the kind of thing.
Work?
Yeah, like that's the kind of thing I was thinking about.
Like, humans didn't even know the proton existed until a few decades before this. I mean, like, yeah. No, it's trippy. I mean, I like the trippiness of it. But you're right. It's not sort of batting 100. No, and it's sort of it's close.
Trying.
I like
it's close.
Yeah, it's going for it.
Yeah, and we like that, going for the fences.
Yeah.
So yes, so there we had the Incredible Shrinking Man. Any final thoughts then on 1957's The Incredible Shrinking Man?
Yeah, I wanted to update about the animals. So apparently to coax the cat to approach the dollhouse, they put food in it. to kind of get it to have these reactions. And then had the time the cat recordings of the cat to get the actor to I mean, quite impressive.
Yeah.
In the novel, it was a Black Widow spider and not a tarantula, but the Black Widows were too small to film, so they were like, "Oh, okay, we have experience with tarantulas," and he knew how to film them, how to manipulate them with little puffs of air to get them to move in certain ways
from the film. Okay, cool.
Now here's the final note on this. The overhead lamps on the set had to be turned up high, leading to the death of not only the tarantula that we suspected, the death of 24 tarantulas.
Oh my god.
There was a miniature tarantula apocalypse, all in the name of art.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Right. Well, I want to sort of applaud this film a little more for the special effects, but also sort of decry some of the tarantula sort of apocalypse that this was. Okay. Well, that's interesting to note. I can see why certain organizations got involved with animal rights on film sets over time, but there you go.
Yeah, I think this is a good film. I mean, I think it's a better film than Creature from the Black Lagoon, although that's a more dramatic film. I like the content more. I like the costume more than the idea of a shrinking guy. But I think this one at least has themes and I love the family theme. I love the masculinity stuff. I love the sort of marriage. I mean, I love seeing this as a marriage falling apart, as somebody descends into incel, toxic masculinity. All of those themes need to be played up, there are things that could be better here and there. They need to be woven more delicately through the film. But for a film that's still geared towards special effects, I think at least it does have those throughout, in a way that some of these other movies don't. So
no, I agree. I mean, I think you say I enjoyed Creature from the Black Lagoon. I think I the suit's good. I think some of the special effects and that are good. The underwater scenes are good, and I think so. It does some good stuff. But I think where I do think this edges out Black Lagoon is that it actually has something to say. We said about like Black Lagoon sort of like throws a nod towards things repeatedly, when it's sort of like science and expeditions need funding. We can have a love triangle. Slight nod to that. Like it was, should we kill this thing to take it back or not? Slight nod to that. Like it's constantly sort of nodding in the right direction, as we said, to doing things, but it never actually seems to get into them. This one at least sort of says, it delves into it a little bit more. It's still nodding, but it's kind of like a much more vigorous nod in those directions of saying sort of things about what it is to be a man. Is it based on your sort of like, your size and status? Is it based on this? There are other communities out there, even sort of are freak shows good or bad, all those kind of things, masculinity. It explores much more than Black Lagoon. And I appreciate it for that, I think. Again, I watch this and think, like, with pacing and modern technology and stuff, another one where I'm like, maybe not a film, but like this could be a really cool like four-part series on like Netflix, where they were like this, the last two episodes really get into the sort of scaled stuff. But no, you could do so much more with this story. It's cool.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it would be interesting if in that early bit, instead of just having them directly sail into, the atomic energy, there's a little bit here about get me a beer, woman,
Yeah.
This sort of like at least establishes some of those themes. If instead you saw more of that marriage and you saw maybe in the modern context, like, somebody's talking about incels on the TV, they're not necessarily the happiest marriage. He feels a little, emasculated by his more successful brother. You could do, without making that the focus. You could do much more with that, and
Yeah.
Sort of make this really resonate in a way that I think would be fascinating.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's you could update so many of the themes on this, and even like some of the narration, which I think would be interesting to an extent. Of all right, who's he narrating to? We'll have the first two he is doing the book or whatever, but I have like others. He then wants to continue it, and he's found a recording device, just a handheld recording device, and he sort of spends some talking into that, like literally sat at it and talking into a microphone that's as big as his body, sort of thing. There's things you can do, I think. But I think it would be interesting to update and explore in much more detail. And like the whole press thing, this whole thing of him becoming, how the press and public opinion would deal with this kind of thing, the good and the bad. It's a hoax. This isn't real, and the vaccines caused it. I don't know, shit like that. I think you could do some interesting bits with it. So.
Think about the scenes in the dollhouse when he shrinks to that level, having actual Barbie dolls in the house.
Yeah.
And he's sort of like staging a little scene, and it's like, oh, right, is this what you wanted all along? Plastic, perfect female, domestic bliss.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, you could play. I think there's so much more you could sort of play up on this that would be interesting, and then get into that thing about masculinity and the sexual side as well. Sort of like as you say, sort of like and explore from his brother and his wife's side and stuff. I think, it could be cool, really. These are IPs and things that I think are prime for re-exploration. Anyway, if you wrap up on Shrinking Man, we're going to go from shrinking to not growing, but sort of titans in our next episode, and an IP that I think has been re-explored. We're doing Godzilla versus or King Kong versus Godzilla on the next one, not the not the sort of the more recent
legendary
Monsterverse. Yeah, no, this is 1960s men in suits, and I think it'll be interesting to see how we take to that. A different tone entirely, and I am looking forward to discussing that. So if you are enjoying this and you're enjoying it on the Patreon and you're ahead of us, thank you very much for your support. We greatly appreciate it. If you're finally getting up to speed on this on the main feed, again, we appreciate all your support on there as well. Leave comments, let us know what you think. Have you read the Incredible Shrinking Man book and the Richard Matherson? Let us know. Is it good? Is it a good comparison? Do you think they should be updated? Well, I'm fascinated to see what people think. But hey, for now, Julian, thank you very much for this discussion.
Yeah, thank you.
And for ladies and gentlemen, we shall see you on the next episode.